Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdicus Dave, and as usual, I'm hanging out with a nerd over here.
Nerd.
What's up, brother? How's it going tonight?
Pretty good. Getting off to a good start on Monday. Some solid nerdarchy work.
It is Monday. I feel like it's.
hmm
I already feel like it's like the middle of the week already, or
Man,
something.
I lose track of days so much anymore. I mean, I was already, living this lifestyle to some extent, but yeah, it just,
You know what the problem is? Is when everyone else joins you in this lifestyle, it messes you up. Like,
yeah.
you're kind of used to like things going on. So some of you may notice we are doing this live chat thing, and normally we just do it for our patrons. And if you're here, welcome. With the quarantine going on and the coronavirus and pandemics and craziness in the world, we figured we would open up our weekly live chat that we do for our patrons to everyone in the intermittent or interim. That's the word I want. You know, so I don't know if we can occupy you for maybe an hour out of the week. We'll do our best.
Yeah. That's good for us too. I like hanging out in the live chat and interacting with people. I mean, I just live by myself, so even those like trips, errands and stuff that I'm not doing, it's like, oh, you really start getting buggy. So
You start
hanging out
missing
with,
it.
yeah, yeah. So these live chats are good for me too.
I generally just leave my house once a week, and that is to go to Ted's house to shoot videos. Like the real difference for me is now like there's people in my house with me, and I'm used to like even with my wife not working anymore, she would still do stuff and be in and out of the house throughout the day, and the kids would have school, the boys in college, so like they're elsewhere. But
hmm
now it's me doing the stuff I normally do, and there's people around. Dark web, we will be taking questions. Just put GM911 or Nerdarchy, something so we can pick them out fairly easily. Tonight we have a topic: D&D ideas, law. It's kind of vague, but to me, like when I think of that, I instantly think back to like my earlier gaming when the cosmology seemed to be so much more based upon the alignment system where I just
hmm
don't feel it in D&D as much as I used to, and I don't know if it's just because we've gone away from it or D&D's gone away from it, but it used to, it seemed like it was a much bigger deal back in the day.
Well, yeah, and that's I'm also of a like mind where it's like I think of it in terms of like cosmic law, and I think that was a little before like kind of this postmodern era where it's like, well, it's relative to like where you are from and the kingdom or whatever. But I mean, back in the day, I mean, way back in the day, there was law and chaos, and that was it. And like chaos just meant like everybody but the player characters because you're representing like law, like civilization and human, people like the order of sentient beings, and chaos was like all the things outside the town that are like just evil and chaotic, and it wasn't so much in this like sort of moral relativism. And a lot of that. I mean, you read like Morka Morcock and stuff, and that's a huge part of that. The whole like
Yeah.
eternal champion thing is like cosmic law and like capital C chaos, like battling each other
Well,
like
Last of
that.
the Renshai was another novel series that was pretty big with us. It was like I don't know if they did 9 of them or 6 of them, but they were thick. Like they were chunky books, right?
hmm
So they definitely did a law chaos axiom for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, and that's like a little less, or I should say, it's a little broader or bigger picture than like the law of the land and things like that. You know what I mean? Like the fact that you had law at all was like, well, you're sort of aligned with that cosmically then.
And so before we jumped on here, I went on the Google and just like what were the planes of law, and like 3 of them kind of like jumped out to me right away, and I was like, okay, those are the ones I remember. But then obviously Nirvana Mechanus, like that's the big one because that's just not good or evil. All it is
Yeah.
law and order. And then Mount Celestia, obviously for your good, and the Nine Hells is where where your evil intersects. But then there was 2 more that I didn't remember.
Oh yeah.
Uh, Archeon, right? It's the plane that is kind of it's the lawful axis, but between neutral and evil, it kind of swings, and it's
Okay.
basically it's a they call it like the infernal battlefield. There's 4 layers to it. they're just solid cubes basically that will collide, but nothing, like no damage is done because nothing disrupts the order. So if you time them, you can like go between them
Hmm.
if you wanted to. But basically, it's just like endless battle. And then
Okay.
Arcadia, there's 3 plane or layers to it, and that's the neutral and good axis of law, and it's nothing but like trees and orchards.
Okay. So it's like what's that? One of the Eberron planes is like that Shavarath or whatever
Oh
the
yeah,
natural
that's
world.
no, I think that's the battle one.
Oh yeah,
That
that's the
that
devil. Yeah,
that's the
that's the devil battle plane.
that's the one where like things open up and like swords are flying and cutting
Yes,
them.
yes, right. And what is the other one? It's yeah, I know what you mean. That there's like another plane where it's like the natural plane.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah. I mean, I think those planes are basically loosely built off of the wheel cosmology, so most of them are represented.
right, right. But yeah, as you're talking, it's definitely reminded Lamania. That's what it is. Uh, I'm definitely reminded of like the earlier edition, like what do you call it? Diagram, like I think it was in the player's handbook or the DMG of like the planes and where they're all connected to each other, and like this one's between that one and stuff. So yeah, that was definitely interesting. Part of the game to me. And we were just kind of talking about alignment last night, which is, I suppose you can't really talk about law in D&D without at least touching on alignment.
Well, yeah. Well, so I guess when I think of law, I do think of alignment, right? Because the cosmology is almost based off the alignment, or the alignment's based off of the cosmology. However you want to look at it, the chicken or the egg, which one came first,
Mm-hmm.
kind of deal. So it's always been, in previous editions, like I said, it's always seemed to be a very big part of the game compared to, you know, I would say from fourth on, it really started phasing that out.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's hard. I think part of it's just that absolutism is probably a harder sell these days. You know,
That's a good
like
point, but it used to be a big part of the game, like the monsters, like an orc was evil,
yeah.
right?
Well, yeah, right. And that's part of the thing that we're getting away from.
And I think with things that have kind of spun off of D&D, like World of Warcraft, have done a different take to it, and then it starts to kind of like feed back in on D&D, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well, the game has changed a lot too. I mean, back then it was like a bit easier sell of like, well, orcs are evil because it's like most of the game was just dungeon delving. They're a monster in your way. I mean, barring the occasional orc children encounter, to test people, it's just like, well, you can pretty much assume if you run into a monster, it is chaotic with a capital C, and therefore wants to destroy civilization. So it's okay to dispatch them.
I remember like one of our earliest campaigns where one of the characters was playing a lawful good paladin, and we did encounter that very scenario where it was the orc children and women that were left,
Yeah.
and the paladin just is like, they're evil, I'm slaying them all.
Mm-hmm.
And as they went
It's
to run.
kind of I mean, in some ways, it's like it erases that ambiguity that people look for and stuff. But in some ways, I guess it kind of makes the game easier, where people be like, well, they're kids. It's like, well, in that universe, they are just like, evil. I mean, I'm not saying I agree with this philosophy, but I mean, it's a little easier when it's just like, well, they're cosmically evil. It's like a fiend or anything else. Like it's just in them. They're just
When it makes it black and white. I
yeah.
mean, I guess it's still there a little bit when you talk about like extremes like a fiend. Like
Mm-hmm.
fiends they are basically the essence of those places they are from.
Right.
Your
It's
devils.
inescapable.
Yeah, your devils are absolutely going to be lawful and evil. And looking for contracts where your demons are primal creatures of evil.
Yeah, back then a lot of it was like where you went when you died was dependent on your alignment, and there was a language of law. Like if you recall that, like you used to know your alignment language.
Oh yeah, yeah. Your alignment had a language, because I think in original D&D there wasn't a common tongue. It was common replaced alignment languages. I mean, and then later they added common back in.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't add it in, but
Yeah,
it back in, but they added it in because even amongst all the alignments, it would be really different too.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, and I read an article years ago that that was kind of like supposed to be considered like, how like Catholic people, would speak Latin or something.
yeah.
It's just like, well, nobody really speaks it, but it's like, but when you get together with other lawful good people, then you can, they know what you're talking about. I think we did have a question actually, and I had several answers to it because I just wrote an article about this a few months ago. Where was it? It was Dark Web.
Dark
Here we
web.
go. Yeah, my player wants to play a lycanthrope, a bear half orc. How would I treat that character? I got 3 suggestions for you as I wrote an article about that a couple months ago. Like I said, one, the easiest way is just say they're a half orc, or like a werebear, and like let's say a barbarian. You could just describe their powers like that. Maybe when they rage, they turn into a bear and stuff, and it's just visual, so it doesn't really affect that. Number 2, just let them play the stat block. I've done that with creatures, and I think you guys did a video about that many years ago too, or maybe it was another article. But just give them the stat block to play, and
Where
obviously at a
creatures
first level.
where creatures are a little bit easier because they actually give you the kind of the sidebar that says do this. It really
Yeah, you can do that.
it really
That's an easy
depends.
way.
It really depends on the level of the party too, because that's going to determine how much it affects your game. If the party is at a level that's kind of close to where that monster's CR would
Mm-hmm.
be, then it probably won't matter. But the higher level, or the lower the level of the players and the characters, the more it's going to affect the outcome of the game because that character is going to be vastly more powerful than everyone else.
And a part of it, I recall more about, what I was thinking about at that time is I would ask them like, well, what is it about being a werebear that they want? Do they just want to turn to a bear? Do they like the idea of like a dark hero who has this curse that maybe they want to solve that? And that's a role playing thing, or is it just a visual thing, or what about it? Is it the mechanics of like, well, you're invulnerable to non-silver weapons and things like that? So I guess I'd start there and say, like, well, what are they looking to get out of the experience? I mean, you could easily just take like lycanthropic abilities and make it like a feat. So the next time they get an ability score increase or something, maybe they can trade it for like the ability to change into the hybrid form or something.
And I mean, honestly, if you look at the sidebar, it's not too terrible. I mean,
Mm-mm.
strength of 19. Well, one more point, you're maxed out anyway. Uh, +1 to AC while you're in bear hybrid form. And you have natural attacks that are based off your strength. So I
Yeah.
mean, it's.
Or check. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's not like too crazy. Um,
Check out that.
especially if you don't add in a lot of the other stuff, if you don't
Mm-hmm.
give them the hit die, right? Like that's the big thing. If you keep their hit die on par with the rest of the party and just give them some of the other stuff, I think you'll be all right.
And I just thought of it. Check out that. What was it called? Path of the Beast. I mean, that's essentially like your barbarian lycanthrope, sort of, right?
Yeah, the
Close enough that you could just reflavor some stuff.
the UA, the barbarian
Mm-hmm.
UA would definitely do it for
Yeah, was that
sure.
what it was called? Path of the Beast.
It is Path of the Beast,
Yeah.
which I mean you can go grab that over at Wizards for free. It's on D&D Beyond for free, so it's
Mm-hmm.
easy enough to access and throw that out there for your one of your players. For Rizzle.
So with what we were saying as far as like law, like capital L, and being this cosmic thing, I don't think either of us really thinks about that now ourselves. Even when we play, like, do you consider that when you're like looking at alignment or that sort of thing?
I don't even think I tend to write down a line on my character sheet anymore. If I do, it's almost an afterthought.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, because like nothing in the game, it doesn't affect anything in the game anymore. So there's almost like no point. Like if you have an idea of how you want to play your character, it doesn't really matter what you write down on your sheet.
Did it ever come up all that much for you? I mean, in the past, like it did have mechanical reasons, like your alignment, but did
Oh,
that? I like a two-part question, I guess, is did it come up that much, or beyond that, did it matter to your games, like whether you
I
were lawful?
I would say it did come up because we've had involuntary alignment changes in the game. over the years. And that was kind of like back in the day, that was a big deal if the DM, deemed to change your alignment because the way you're acting or because of something that happened in the game.
Mm. I played a character that was lawful good for a campaign a couple of years ago. And I remember thinking like, wow, it was an urban campaign. And like that sort of thing comes up a lot more there where like, they're like, well, why don't we just break into this place and stuff? It's like, I don't know if this character would. I mean, I wasn't using it as like a box to keep myself in, but it was kind of like a guide in that way. Like, well, they respect the law. So I don't know if they would be like, yeah, let's just break the law and break into that place to accomplish our goals. Like, there's probably another way. It's the same way in a lot of those video games like Baldur's Gate and stuff where it's like, well, it's a lot easier to not be lawful because it's like all those times you rifle through people's drawers, because it's like, well, you can click on it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Not exactly lawful.
Well, I mean, I guess in previous editions too, though, like your alignment would come up for spells, as mentioned in the chat, magic items. There were restrictions. If you're a monk, you had to be lawful. If you were a barbarian, you couldn't be lawful. So, like, that was one combination you were never able to do for those reasons. And what I've always thought of though is when it came to law and chaos, I really didn't think of it in the sense necessarily as written laws, but as a more of a way of how that character perceived the world. They were orderly, and yes, they were more likely to acknowledge laws. But the reason why I say that doesn't matter as much is because you could go from kingdom to kingdom and the laws will change, right? So at that point, it almost seems silly if it's purely based on the law, because it's like, which law are you following? You're from this kingdom, but you're in that kingdom. So,
well, I mean, think about it in relative terms to yourself. If you went to another country that had different laws, you wouldn't just be like, well, I'm just going to do whatever I want because I don't care about their laws. It's like, I would say that most people are lawful. I mean, you respect that. Like, if you're driving your car and there's a stoplight and there's nobody around, you're going to stop, right? Generally,
sure.
Because you respect the law and you fear the consequences.
I think a lot of times it's more than that because, right, a person that's chaotic or evil and they're fearful would probably still respect the law. Only because they don't want to get, they don't want to get caught. They don't want to face the consequences.
So if you scale that up, somebody that, believes in like capital L law probably thinks like, well, there's a certain way the universe works and I can't disrupt that. I mean, that's a no-no.
Yeah, in the Daryl in the chat, lawful can also be your personal.
Yeah, with your postmodern 5th edition, sure.
But I kind of always saw that as like where you kind of had a set way, and you're the kind of character that would have a routine that you followed day in and day out. Where a chaotic character would be more flighty and more whimsical in how they do things.
Well, it's a subtle difference, though, too. I mean, that's certainly true, but it's like maybe you have that routine because you believe like, well, everything in the universe has to have some kind of discipline and structure. And like, I'm just paying homage to that by like, making my breakfast the same way every day and like making sure I'm at the train, I don't delay or whatever,
Basically, it's just TikTok from Batman.
Yeah, everything has a place. Everything, there's just going to be precision. The whole thing falls apart if one of the parts doesn't follow the way.
The supreme order of the universe. So Strange does. Back when Bill Webb was working on Swords and Sorcery, there was a text-based adventure thing, and they had ran some games there. My paladin made the mistake of being a guardsman and a paladin. I can see how that could be conflicting.
Yeah, adventures. I mean, see that, and that's where the conflict kind of arises, right? And it's like when it comes down to the personal actions, like when you're adventure, it's pretty common to skirt the law, right? Because it's like, well, it's for the greater good, or whatever. It's like we have our goals, or like this society is corrupt, or like I don't believe in that law, so I don't think we should follow it, and because we need to do the right thing.
Right, where like lawful evil is more about the loopholes of the law,
yeah,
and finding those in between places. where like a devil's, they're trying to. It's always about bargaining and getting over, and the most craftiest devils can stick to all the rules and the laws,
Yeah.
but they still get you.
Mm-hmm.
Where,
Just like one of our encounters in Out of the Box is very lawful in that way, right? The devil's hospitality. It's just like, well, it's very specific wording in the deal, and not
written
necessarily.
possibly written in runes.
Yeah.
It's not my fault you can't read them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it definitely comes up. So yeah, ultimately we've gotten away from it. I would definitely like to see some more stuff about Mechanus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very popular thing, like Modrons and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, in that respect, like, well, you got two awesome sort of factions to play off each other with Modrons and Primus, and then you got like the Slatty and I forget the like the head Slat. It's in a Mordenkainen's folio of fiends or whatever.
Oh, I know who you're talking about, but the name escapes me at the moment.
But yeah, people love Modrons and the Great Modron March, and
I was hoping when we got Mordekainen's Tome of Foes that we were going to get a little bit of that.
mm-hmm.
Still hoping.
Yeah.
Still hoping.
Well, maybe someday. I mean, there's certainly tons of DM's Guild adventures and stuff that deal with like Modrons and whatnot.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, there's so much stuff over there.
We talked earlier about like Michael Moorcock and like Elric and stuff, and that stuff's. I mean, again, I think of like cosmic alignment a lot of the time. I mean, like he worked. His whole society was like paid homage to the Chaos God, and, Lord Ariak and stuff. And then it's like, well, he rejected that and was, working with the gods of law. And then he was like, I don't like either of these people. They're both trying to control the universe. It's a bunch of BS. And I think he allied himself with like elementals and primal forces because it's like, well, it's just fire and earth. And then probably after a while, I probably said F them too because he was just that sort of character.
I don't actually remember. I read those quite a while ago. I just remember he just ended up murdering a lot of people, I believe.
Yeah. But like that's what, what was this? Melnibone? Like they were very like capital C chaotic. I see a lot of people wishing everybody safety and health. That's good. We wish the same.
Yeah. So,
speaking of laws, it's not a law, but it is a guideline that everybody's following. You had your first social distancing video today.
It depends where you are from. Actually, it is the law, right? There may be temporary laws, but businesses are shut down. Mm-hmm. You can report businesses for being open when they're not supposed to.
Well, there you go.
So, depending where you're at, it is the law.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly live in a lawful society. And, speaking of like mortal laws, it just sort of came up in our session 0 we had last night for our game. The DM was describing like the laws of the land and like, well, if you, like encountering monsters in the dungeons beneath the city is one thing, but if it's like fellow adventurers, that's against the law to confront them.
Yeah, so we did a session 0 start / of the game kind of with Esper the Bard. We're going to be doing a crossover with Esper in a couple weeks. We're going to be playing on his channel. Me, Doug, Ted, and Megan Hardy from Dungeons and Dragons School, or classes, I should say.
Yeah.
Megan Hardy is really cool. She does Dungeons and Dragons on the Outschool program. So basically, she teaches Dungeons and Dragons or teaches through Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. One of those. But basically, she plays Dungeons and Dragons for a living. That's all that really matters.
Okay. They do learn stuff. It's just the context for the lessons is through Dungeons.
I don't think so, man. I think she straight up just runs games. I mean,
but I think they're like designed to like teach, like a social studies lesson or like a math or something like that to some extent.
So yeah, the laws have not come down in Florida yet.
Mm-hmm.
I did see a pastor. They said put a warrant out because he was still holding church, which I don't know. It's just weird for like all this stuff to be going on and people just not like getting it.
Yeah,
I spent like the first.
Well, it's hard. I mean, it's just human nature. People tell you not to do something. Your first is like, hey, don't tell me not to do something. Or, I'm gonna do it anyway. Or like, don't tell me what's safe or whatever. It's a big deal. It's tough. It's weird to wrap your head around. It's particularly difficult for me, like I said, just because it's like, Well, I mean, my life didn't change much as far as like going out and stuff, so it's weird to go out at all, like to the grocery store. It's like there's nobody out, or conversely, like I said, even the limited going out, it's like not at all. So I'm starting to get a little cabin fever and get a little buggy here and there. I must admit.
Yeah, I can imagine. So for me, it's the opposite because like now
Yeah.
there's people in my house that usually aren't here. But
Right.
and you mentioned earlier, like today, our first social distancing video came up. We're calling them Dungeons and Social Distancing because me and Ted are recording them remotely through Zoom and putting them up, and the quality's not quite as good as our normal stuff, especially the audio. But we're still able to put up content, and we still have other content that we shot before, so it'll kind of get mixed in and out. But we're just trying to do our part to stay responsible
Mm-hmm.
and keep everybody safe. I wanted to say, on the game we played, Esper was saying one of the things he would do to kind of like bring alignment is when players died, which I thought was really cool.
I
So
remember that.
so when you would have a death scene, if you were evil, it would be you being dragged to hell or to the abyss, and it would be like really terrible. Or if you were a good character, it would be really nice and peaceful, and you're going to a better place.
Okay.
So I thought that was really cool thing. I'm gonna have to remember that too for the next time. The next time we have character death.
Mm-hmm.
And also speaking of character death, we had our first character death in session 0.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Thanks
you
to
would
me.
if you would have shared that or not, or if we should save it because
Yeah, I'll share. So yeah, I was playing a grung warlock of the Lurker of the Deep, mainly because it came up during video planning or whatever a few weeks ago. They're like, oh, they don't speak common. And I thought it'd be funny to have a character that can communicate with the others, and he could speak to any beast at will. He could speak telepathically to any creature with a swimming speed, but he could not speak with the other party members, nor understand them, except for Ted's character, who we worked out our backstory, so he picked Grung. But yeah, I died. I didn't get all broken up about it. Characters die. Adventuring ain't easy, as I always say. And especially in a one shot or so. Actually, I don't. I take that back. I don't. Even if it's like an open ended campaign, and I have a character that it happens. It's dramatic. It's fun, and it's just a chance to make another character. I could see it happening too. I was like, I'm going down, and that thing did its special attack again. And I was already down. I rolled a 1 on my death save, and kaput.
yeah, I wasn't feeling very good about that fight either. I think I was down to like 3 hit points.
Yeah, it was heavy hitter.
But you know what? Paladins totally freaking rock. Went from 3 hit points to like 23 or something, or 33. So oh yeah, I think it was over 30.
I went from max to down to 8 to down to dead.
Yeah.
I had max health and went down in 1 hit. I think it was his beak bit me. Oh no, it was that screech. It was like his owl bear screech.
Yeah. So it wasn't a regular owlbear. Oh,
Right.
cool. D&D Dad in the chat. Hey, Dave. Hope you're doing great and staying healthy. This is the guy from the Dayton airport. So when me and Ted went out to Ohio, we ended up catching a late flight, and one of us had like a D&D shirt on or something, and a guy stopped and said, "Hey, you guys play D&D?" I was like, "Yeah." Had no idea about Nerdarchy. And we just started talking, and like we ended up talking the whole flight. I thought I was going to sleep, but that didn't happen. But it was cool. The flight wasn't full. We were able to stretch out. The 3 of us just talked for however long the flight was about D&D, and then he was kind enough to give us a ride to our hotel and didn't even axe murder us or nothing.
Oh yeah. I remember you telling me that story. Sure.
Yeah, so
That's
it was
cool.
definitely cool.
Let's see. So we got Dungeon Class there says they're going to play their online for the first time. I added in the gasp. They mentioned that's all I play anymore, so I'm used to that.
I still prefer in person, I must say.
I do for sure. I just haven't had an in-person group in a long time, so I'm used to playing online.
The online is really hard, especially if you're not a very assertive person, because like if you're kind of just waiting to get in there, and then the way the cuts work on whatever chat service you're using, because none of them are perfect. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so you like if you're not assertive, it's harder. And if you know you're playing with people that aren't assertive, you should try and pay. I feel like you should try and pay more attention to see if they're trying to get in there or not. So you're not
Yep.
always just stepping on them by accident.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great tip. Yeah, I guess I just kind of like take that for granted. But yeah, just paying attention, whether you're the DM or the other players, just like, well, letting other people get a chance to talk or jump in or, kind of looking at their camera view. It's like, do they look anxious? Like they want to get in there? But as a DM, too, you can also just call on people and like if you're like, oh, well, Jill hasn't spoken in like 45 minutes, like maybe I'll just ask her to make this next check or something like that, or, do something to promote them talking.
Hey, dungeon class it's actually worse than a natural. It's literally becomes we start real life being turn based because that's essentially what being on a Zoom call can be like,
Mm-hmm.
unless everyone just starts yelling at the same time until someone comes through. Jatham had a question. I'd seen it up there and then I kind of started
Mm-hmm.
babbling and forgot about it.
Sure.
But why has magic in D&D always been considered eldritch? I'm not sure what you mean by that because it's always been, they've always used that Vancian style magic system.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that meant either. Considered eldritch by whom? I mean, I don't recall the word eldritch itself being used a whole lot.
Up until 5th edition, really, or that
Like
probably
what?
started 4th. Probably started with the warlock
Yeah, because the eldritch blast and whatnot.
because I don't know, eldritch is weird and sinister or ghostly is the definition.
Oh well, then I'd say I don't. It hasn't always been considered that. Well, we'll see if they clarify. Maybe we'll get some clear thing. But in the meantime, yeah, dungeon class, great tips. I find playing online, and this, hopefully a lot of us are playing more games online, and maybe even reaching out, meeting new people to play one shots with and stuff during this time. But I find it's actually real rewarding game sessions, like 2-3 hours. It's like there's usually a great amount of role playing because it's like, well, it's a lot of talking and describing things, and it kind of promotes exploration because there is no map generally, as if you're just doing theater of the mind. So it's kind of like players have to ask you things about the environment. There's usually a couple combats which go pretty smoothly online. I think as long as you rule in favor of the PCs most of the time, and I usually just like if somebody does an area effect, it's like, well, it's probably going to catch most of the bad guys, not every single one. You know what I mean? So there's some concessions like that. I mean, you're not getting up the templates like, well, if I position my fireball, like, oh, so you're using like Roll20 or fantasy rounds. Absolutely.
So why can't there be other named focuses of magic? Well, I guess like D&D has always been there's two, right? There's divine and arcane.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like the power source. I mean,
And,
that's
and I
how.
don't even think it gets into that too much in fifth edition, does it? I mean, they don't make that distinction like in the past where it's like, well, this is like a bard is a arcane caster or whatever. It doesn't really.
Yeah, it's not. It's not rooted
It's
as
like
deep as it
alignment.
used to be. Yeah, it's kind of like hinted at, right? Like paladins, druids,
Yeah.
and clerics. Your divine casters, but they don't even really have to be per se, and everybody else is kind of an arcane caster. But
Mm-hmm.
then you have the weirdness in the sense that every single character class casts spells at this point, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
I mean, finally they started giving some magic to the barbarian, even.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah. And I guess if we were playing fourth edition, that would probably be considered primal because that was like their power source, right?
yeah, but in fourth edition they just had power sources, like
Mm-hmm.
because Marshall was a power source, right? So it just defined, where it came from, less so than I don't know, because I guess in fourth was there a divine and an arcane as well
Yeah.
for powers? Yeah. So
Yeah.
they
Because
just
it was
they
like,
just added more.
right. Let's see. They did clarify why can't there be other named focuses of magic? I just don't. I'm not wrapping my head around that question. Like there isn't those things in the game as far as I know, or at least not that I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I mean it's always been tooth flavors, and then they added in psionics later
Yeah,
as
they
another.
always add it in later.
They always added in
Yeah.
later.
So in that sense, I mean, in game terms, like really, Eldritch only comes up with like Eldritch Blast is the only Eldritch thing, and that makes sense because you are like sort of an occult character, a warlock. I mean,
And
you know.
then someone had mentioned they think of I think it was Strange does they associate that stuff with Lovecrafty and Eldritch, and that's what I do as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like strange entities and powers
Otherworldly
from.
beings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly what a warlock is. You're making pacts with those beings.
Great Cthulhu.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like what we played when we did our Other Skies game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a lot like that.
Which at some point, who knows, that may get resurrected.
It was a great game, great players. I had a lot of fun playing that campaign. Have you been playing more games? Have you found that your family game or just more games come up as people try to pass the time?
Well, no, because the family game we had people coming into the house, so that's not happening. Because my nephew and one of my son's friends would come over and we'd play that game. So that's kind of off. The family game would be really hard if we tried doing it remotely. I feel like more so than like the games that we normally do.
Right.
I wanted to say even though we played remotely last night, we didn't use a virtual tabletop. Although I felt like Esper was running a virtual tabletop manually.
Yeah. I didn't know what that was, but that was a pretty good software. I liked it, and I don't know if it's free, but that's another option for people out there too. What was it called? StreamYard? Something like that?
StreamYard was what we were using to connect with, but then I felt like he was just screen sharing.
Because he had the maps and stuff.
Yeah, and just using some basic programs where he would make up tokens. He had layers, and almost like Photoshop or something like that, where he was just using that kind of a program and very low key manually doing a virtual tabletop minus the virtual tabletop. I mean, it worked. It was fun. He had to move everyone around, and it worked out pretty well. Whenever you play D&D or another role playing game, I feel like if each of the players had at least one moment where they're like, together. Cheering at somebody's success, and everybody had like a memorable moment, then all the other stuff's just bells and whistles. Whether you had a map or whether you had tokens or a virtual tabletop or whatever, it's like it's all just fluff. It's like, did people come? Did they interact with each other? Was there a few high points that got everybody to cheer and everybody got like their cool moment to do like their character's cool thing? Then you did it. You did the thing. Did you get to watch Doug's character die horribly?
Yeah, I was right there. I was just as happy as everybody else. I don't, like I said, I don't get attached to characters like that much, and I've always thought like, well, adventuring's easy. I mean, sometimes you go all the way to 20 and tell an epic story, and sometimes your first level and you get killed with a stray goblin arrow. It just happens.
Fatal gravity. Yes, we're aware because of. In honor, or I guess in solidarity to the coronavirus, we decided to open up our Patreon-only live chats and, I don't know, suck up an hour of some people's week and hopefully give you guys something to do. We can babble at each other and listen to us babble about D&D and games. So,
yeah, and to get back on topic, another thing, like a lot of these topics in law included, I think of, it just depends on how much you want to feature it in your game. Like one of the better adventures that most people consider.
Are you going to pull a book off the shelf there?
Yeah, is Dragon Heist, right? And that's a part of the game. Like that is a feature of the campaign. It's like you're in Waterdeep. There's the code legal or whatever at the end. And when I play through it, it's like, and the book advises you like, oh, share that with your players and they explain like, oh, these are the crimes in the city. And many times we consulted that. We're like, well, this isn't technically a crime. So, or like, is this and stuff. And it was a feature of the game. So,
I'm thinking in a totally different direction where you're consulting it almost like a checklist.
Yeah.
Have we broken this law yet?
Well, we didn't want, like I said, I mean, it was just a part of that campaign. So it's just like, well, we wanted to check, like, if we decided to go do this or that. It's like, is this a breaking law? Like, nope, we're good. So,
you know what? So this is my first one on the Publix, right? With everyone since we started doing this. You guys.
Okay, yeah.
So I do want to say, a couple weeks ago, if you had like 50 Nerdarchy videos dropped on you all at once, I apologize. It was not intentional. There was definitely a misclick. Mistakes were made, and we watched I watched in like an hour, 2 hours, 500 subs unsub.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. Well, here's a question from Strange Dude. Did we mention any movie or literature examples of law enemies? Well, the enemies part I think is just left over from the Unseen Enemies title last week. But to answer your question, I mean, sort of.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
like I said in the Elric books, like the cosmic forces of law were, somewhat of an antagonist. I mean, lawful evil, Darth Vader. I mean, the Empire. That's like, does it get any more lawful evil than that? That's a great enemy that you. I mean, they are the law, right? They set the law in the galaxy.
You know, the kind of like the embodiment, the living embodiment of um particular, like you said, cosmic forces
Mm-hmm.
is definitely falls
But
into that. There's definitely that's definitely definitely tropes for
yeah,
that.
or what about Ozymandias? I mean, that's a how about that for a campaign villain? You know, I mean, he followed the laws to some extent, or he used them, manipulated them. I would say he's almost lawful neutral. I mean, he was going for the greater good, right? Like sacrificing, weighing those options. Like, well, you know, tens of thousands of people might die to save millions. I mean, those are like cosmic sorts of questions that somebody might, have to answer themselves in a big, campaign like that.
Who did you say again?
Ozymandias from like The Watchmen,
Oh, okay, okay.
you
I was
know.
like, is he saying Asmodeus?
No, but well, I mean, yeah, it doesn't. That's pretty much it. But like, good, the law can, like we were just saying earlier, like enemies could be somebody that's good, like a local sheriff or constable. It's like players often, adventurers often like break into things, break people out of jail and stuff. So they're technically criminals breaking the law. So an enemy could just be somebody that's totally in the right, upholding the law, and the players just don't agree with it.
Well, also too, like any lawful deity, that the players find them set against would fall into that category as well.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're talking good, neutral, or evil, if they find themselves at odds with that could be the big bad where you eventually face an avatar.
Mm-hmm. There's a question from BK Dan. Would you consider Menzo Baranzan lawful evil or chaotic as a whole? I'm not 100% sure. I'm 99% sure, but I actually like that Drow are typically neutral evil now, because to me that's always been like the selfish alignment, right? And it's just like I'm sure there is laws in Menzo Baranzan, like if your house is completely destroyed, that there's probably a law for that. Like, oh, you're a non-citizen anymore.
Yeah, I mean the idea that the city was chaotic evil never really worked. In order to
Yeah, I
really,
mean it's
it didn't function that way.
right. It still has to function. I mean, there's a large population of people. If it was just total chaos, it's like, well, who's going to clean up the streets, right? Who's going to take the garbage out?
Yeah, I mean when I pop in Drow on D&D Beyond, there's a bunch of chaotic evils, but there appears to be way more neutral evils,
Yeah.
which makes sense. I mean, you need some kind of rules and laws to have a functioning
Mm-hmm.
society.
Yeah, and
Like,
most of the people there would probably happily break those laws if they could get away with it for their own benefit,
I mean,
right?
even like the Fae are always depicted as being chaotic, yet the Fae also still have their own laws and rules that they have to abide by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
they got those capital L laws, ancient laws.
well, and the other part of it too is like if you never did anything in a lawful or orderly way, you would never truly be chaotic.
Yeah, right. So yeah, they're interesting questions to ask. In my own games, law is something that doesn't come up very much at all, because it's like, I mean, you've played a game now a few times, and it's like, well, it's sort of a frontier setting. There isn't like, a code legal for the little town of 30 people that adventurers start. It's sort of more of like a community thing. So
I've always looked at alignments too more like a dimmer switch, right? Where you have a light switch where you can like just flip it on or off, and that used to be kind of how people would view alignments, and I always considered that wrong or off. I always thought of more of a dimmer switch where you kind of like, you're mostly lawful and good, but there are things that can make you move in and out of that.
Well, I think that aligns, no pun intended, with alignment in that old cosmic sense too, because it's like, well, I mean, you can believe that there's a structured order to the universe and you want to do good. It doesn't mean you're not going to like, steal a pie or something if you're, from a windowsill or whatever. It doesn't mean like, well, you're going to Tartarus now. You know what I mean? It's just like, you're still, you still are a law-abiding good person.
For the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I, in the sense, it's like, unless you're like the Good Place, the show where it's just like every time you do something, they're just like taking those points off. Like, sorry, you didn't get enough points to get into Mount Olympus.
Well, I do feel like there's a little bit of that going on, like and like if you were to do too many things that were outside of your alignment, like when we used to play, that would shift you permanently because you're not doing the things that would make you lawful and or good or neutral, as the case may be. And when you died, I do feel like there's a cosmic bean counter somewheres figuring out,
Yeah, there'd have to be, right? To see where your soul goes. It's like, are you going to go to the Elysian Fields or...
You have lawful, law, chaos, good, evil, and neutral, and then there's just hash marks all over the place. Mm-hmm. At the end, the cosmic accountant adds them up.
Again, I really strange to us is talking about like laws of different countries. Again, I have to go back to my original thing where it's like that's mortal law. That's lowercase l, man. Like I don't often think of like postmodern relativism in regards to alignment, if it even comes up at all.
But going back to the idea of a lawful villain, it actually works out really well.
Oh yeah, because really great villains.
I mean, tyrants tend to be very, very much have laws.
Sheriff of Nottingham. I mean, he was lawful, right? I mean, he was the representing the law in there. And Robin Hood was a rebel. He was a rebel rouser.
So I mean,
definitely chaotic.
Because law and just aren't always the same thing.
Exactly.
And that's where you can find interesting ground to come up with, a villain that is very, very lawful.
Even like a planetar or something could be a villain to this, depending on the circumstances, right? I think in Curse of Strahd, even one of like the abbot or whatever is like a solar, isn't it? And it's like, he's just crazy. And he's like, oh, if I construct this monstrous corpse bride for Strahd, then he'll, lay off me or whatever.
Well, the idea of a solar or planetar that have come to the conclusion that the only way that they're going to have true law and goodness in the multiverse is to get rid of the things that keep effing it up, including, the different races.
Yeah, right.
So you could do a villain that is really just trying to extinguish them. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have the opposite with that with Zerial and Hell.
Yeah.
Right? Like, she was kind of like...
Can't bait him, join him.
Yeah. Basically.
Take him out from the inside. Hey, do we have any, housekeeping stuff? I think, did Ted just do his fan game the other day? His monthly game?
He did. Sunday during the afternoon.
Boy, that means I'm up next already, huh?
I guess so. I don't know. Ted keeps track of that stuff.
Okay. I always wonder if we have stuff we have to share, giveaways.
We might. But if we don't, we can blame Ted. He's not here. Okay.
Hey, literally thousands of other people have taken advantage of this. I might as well mention it. We got that thing going on for people playing games at home. More, if you need some material to play, you can go over to the Dereki website, and we have a coupon code where you can get three of your products that you choose, 100% free, no strings attached. It's any of the adventures and supplements, and if you use the coupon code Stay Nerdy on checkout, it just applies 100% discount to the 3 top adventures and supplements over there. So I would recommend people get Beardomancy, because that is my favorite product. And we're coming out with Hairable ideas in just a few days for our patrons getting early access. And I also like Frost King a lot, which has some cool adventures and player options in there. And I like Taking Chances. I think that's a great book with a crap ton of activities for characters to do during the game, and player options and mini games and new tools and new items. And there's just a ton of stuff over there. So those are my
So
recommendations.
so that's pinned in the description. I have a pinned comment and in the description you can find that information.
Oh, okay, cool.
So yeah, for your convenience, yeah, we've given away thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of products over the
Yeah, it
past
stings well.
past week or so. So, but you know what? We know a lot of you are stuck home,
Yeah.
got nothing going on. So here's some stuff you can either use to throw into your games virtually, or you just want stuff to read or to inspire you.
Yeah, it's been fun seeing some of the comments of people that have used some. Like somebody ran Trip to the Planar Zoo, which is a great adventure where the characters wake up in the human exhibit, or like the humanoid exhibit,
Yes.
and then they have to figure out that they're in a basically zoo of these interplanar collectors. That's a fun one. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Now, there's been a lot. Have you sifted through to see what's been going out the most?
It's not what I thought. There's a lot of it's not just the most expensive ones, which I was happy to see. It's not like people just I'll just get the 3 most expensive things here and get those for free. There's a lot of Planar Zoos, a lot of Frost King, some Muckwuckle. Not as a lot of, there's some Hit Dice to Heroics, which is a great one with alternate uses for Hit Dice, but yeah, it's a lot of the sort of things with a lot of stuff in them. Like there's player actions in an adventure, and like magic items, and a location and a map, and an NPC, and that sort of like the. But Taking Chances doesn't have any of that. It's just activities to do, like there's an adventure mystery you can solve using your tools. There's like mini games and all. There's probably like 20 mini games in that book of just stuff like. Some of them are games the actual players can play, like dice games that you made up. It's pretty cool.
So, let's see. BK Dan asked a question.
Oh, okay.
Is it a backdrop or the same set behind you two? We are green screening.
Yes.
Ted has the actual set at his house.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is the Nerdarchy set. I can't. What does it look like when you... I cannot grab the iTug.
Grab the Adiug or the Mimic. Yeah. And we don't have. I was gonna say.
Ooh, that's a great question.
What's that?
Taurus, what about different laws, like the laws of physics different in your world of D&D? That's an awesome question. I didn't even think about that. And, absolutely. I mean, I play with that kind of stuff all the time. Whether it's just like a localized region where gravity works different or anything like that is so much fun. Yes.
So
absolutely.
I'm writing that down. Only because we generally do these chats and then we turn them into a newsletter at some point and talk about them. But no, that makes me think a lot about Manual of the Planes in 2nd and 3rd edition, where they like get really deep into that kind of stuff where, the gravity for particular worlds can be different. It could be lighter, it could be heavier, it could be subjectionable, where you just you decide which way gravity is, and it's different for everyone.
Yeah. And those can be awesome, like adventure hooks and parts of the adventure too. Like I'm reminded of the sort of like witchery monsters video that we did as like a VR for Z's, right? Where like part of it's like, well, you take this monster and juice it up with all these resistances and lore and ways characters can fight it. But you can also that's great for a layer or just another aspect of the creature. Like maybe there's a regional effect that when it's nearby, things just work different. Maybe like fire does more damage because it's like superheated air or whatever, just anything you can think of. And those can be like clues to the players too. Like when you're in an area where like, oh, something works different, then they know something's up. And it could become like a really dynamic encounter or just exploration area. Imagine if gravity's lighter, it's like, well, you got to reach a high area. That could be fun. We have one of our encounters in the book is sort of like that. That's the shell game, is that what it's called? Where you sort of like got to float these pieces around and link them together to like climb up this thing, and that's a perfect example of what Doris is talking about. Just states right, it's like magic doesn't work in this chamber. Like it gives it, it's just like there is different laws, so you can totally play with that as a DM to achieve the effect you want. It's like, well, I don't want to just fly up to the top, so it's like these things just don't work in this area, and you don't have to have some complicated reason why, or like a way for them to figure out how to cease that effect.
you could look at previous editions and see how they did different things. Like, on the positive planes, when you used certain magic, like for 5e would probably be like your radiant. That stuff would be super powerful, but your necromancy school of magic would be diminished, and vice versa. There was definitely a lot of that going on, and also too, like back then, your undead had a direct link to the negative planes, and they
Yeah,
would
you
draw
could kill
their
them with the
energy.
heal spells.
In third, yeah, and only in third though. I don't think they did that, but prior to that.
No, because
Um,
yeah, it was very codified in third edition of that kind of stuff.
and then you had to use the cause spells, I think, to heal undead.
Yep,
So yeah,
absolutely.
but there's no reason. Dungeon class brings up, like Dark Sun had magic that worked different. If you're an arcane spellcaster, the only way you could really do it is drawn from the life force of the world. If you were a defiler, you didn't give an F, and you just like created wasteland around you. But if you're a preserver, it took more time and energy and patience to cast magic.
That's a great setting to discuss the idea of law too. I mean, all those what were they called? The
City states or the
Yes,
sorcerer kings?
yeah, the city states. It's like, as I recall, most maybe there was one that wasn't ruled by just like an evil tyrant, and they all had their own cruel laws. They were slightly different, but they were all mean, and there was slavery and all kind of stuff. And like that's a pretty lawful, dangerous world to adventure in. And often people escape the law into the chaos of the wastes of Athos because it's like, oh, it's better than dealing with these sorcerer kings and their laws, right?
Well, sort of, except for most people that go into the waste would just die.
Well, yeah, but staying in the city is a good chance that's going to happen too.
So in the there was only one that was not evil, but it didn't start that way. Like, Tyr became the free city, but
Oh yeah,
only
yeah,
because they disposed of the
yeah.
sorcerer king that was there.
Kelak, was that his name?
It,
Kelak, King Kelak, or
it
something.
was,
Yeah,
and he
but
was
yeah, that's a great. Oh, good.
he was the first one to try and metamorphose into a dragon.
Oh, that's right.
The Dark Sun books were such a great series.
And that's a game where a setting where you'd behoove you to follow both the local laws and the laws of nature. As far as like making sure you have like supplies and water and stuff, because that'll kill you too.
One of the early campaigns that I ran, arcane casters, or no, I think no, just wizards. It was third edition. Just wizards were outlawed because they were considered devil worshippers or demon worshippers, where only natural arcane magic was considered, pure or good,
Sure.
or at least not evil anyway. And that was in that campaign, there was a war between scions and sorcerers, and nobody really liked wizards. So that set up kind of like a different thing. So the wizards had to have an underground.
Yeah, imagine, wizards, sorcerers, any kind of spellcasters would probably be considered a danger to society at large, I'd imagine. You just waggle your fingers and cause untold destruction.
So Jatham is talking about mixing technology in with magic in a campaign. So in our world, we have a town or a city that's like that, Frosthaven, and it's built with above volcanic activity, or at least that's what they think, and it's in a basin in the Arctic, so it creates this warm spot where you can live and kind of thrive, and they've harnessed the steam from this natural volcanic activity to kind of create like steam powered things and have some level of technology compared to other places. But actually what it is a portion of hell was transported beneath the city, and that is where the fire and the heat actually comes from.
Yeah.
So even like the technology and stuff that they have is kind of infused with infernal power.
Let's see. We're getting close to time, but I did see a comment I wanted to. There it is. Taurus, yes. Talking about Warforged being included in Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. They would not, because they are not constructs. They are sentient beings. They're not automatons.
They're not technically robots.
Yes.
They're living constructs, much different
Mm-hmm.
than the other constructs.
Yes. They're sentient.
So they can murder your ass
Yep.
and then feel bad about it.
Yes.
Or not, as the case may be.
You know, I've really been thinking about like like this idea of laws and stuff, and I would like as it pertains to me particularly, and like I don't know, I guess in my campaign setting, I'm more interested in like what you mentioned, like old, the kind of ancient laws of like fairy and things like that, where it's like that's more fun to me than just like stodgy human mortal laws. And you guys have even you missed the one session, but it's like, well, a lot of it is, it's dealing with Fae and stuff. It's like, this seems even more hairy than dealing with like regular legal codes. You know what I mean? Like they have a different kind of law.
It's a bunch of rules and laws, and you're not privy to them, so it's bad. It's like I ate a donut, so now they own my soul. But you offered
didn't know
it to
about
me.
that law, right? Yeah, by something totally innocuous. Like, well, you welcomed me in, so if you welcome me in and eat my donuts, I get to keep your soul, right?
That's the way it goes. Boo, hiss, BK Dan, Palladium.
Yeah.
I do not like play. I like the. I played.
I didn't think about system mastery. It wasn't a term in my lexicon back then. It was just like, whatever, it's a fun game. I mean, now looking at it, it's like, oof, man, this is.
I know. I think
clunky as AF.
I think Palladium is a terrible game with a lot of cool ideas. I had fun playing it too. Don't get me wrong. We've played a few games, and it's been fun. But that system is not a favorite of mine. That's for sure. It's just so 80s. So it's like in the 80s when you did game design, it was like how many charts and tables could you cram into a game? Because the more you did, the better the game was.
And here I am today. I love a table or a chart, right? I mean, when they show up in books, we're like, ooh, a table to roll on. Yeah, all right. Give me that.
Yeah, but
it's a fine balance.
It is a fine balance.
I know you weren't familiar with it, but man, if you check out Rollmaster, if you think Rift's Palladium had a lot of charts, whew, brutal. Literally.
For sure. Anyway, it is that time. We'll be back next Monday. We're going to keep doing these until the pandemic has passed, and it's just a small thing that we're trying to do and keep everyone occupied for at least a little bit. An hour a week. It's the least we can do. So everyone, please stay out there, practice social distancing, get online, play your online D&D games, and until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.